According to scientific views, the first ancestors of humans appeared around 2.5 million years ago, while the first microorganisms emerged over 3.5 billion years ago. Scientists have been trying to recreate the history of Earth for hundreds of years, but each new discovery reveals how far they are from reaching their goal. In this video, I will tell you about the most impressive archaeological finds that can completely change your perception of life on our planet. Enjoy watching. The Burgess Shale in Canada is a rich fossil site of the Cambrian period. In 1977, fossils of a bizarre creature named Hallucigenia were discovered there, which translates from Latin as offspring of hallucinations. In the same year, scientists were able to describe their find. According to them, Hallucigenia is an invertebrate, worm-like creature with 2 rows of stilt-like legs and dorsal spines. For a long time, scientists could not understand where the animal's head and tail were located. Later, prints of Hallucigenia were also found in China. These were more detailed, and thanks to them, it was finally possible to discern the head of this creature. It turns out they had eyes and a mouth on their heads and several soft tentacles below it, with which the animal could dig in the soil. You must agree this creature looked very strange, and looking at it, you understand why scientists named it as they did. Scientists have long been trying to answer the question, when did the first settlers appear in the Americas? With this aim, a huge number of excavations have been conducted. For a long time, it was believed that the first people came to these lands 13,500 years ago. But with each new find, this figure changed. During recent excavations in a cave in Zacatecas, Mexico, archaeologists discovered a large number of primitive tools. The age of these artifacts was about 30,000 years. Imagine how shocked the scientists were. Unfortunately, no human remains were found at this site. However, the quantity of tools indicated that people had lived in this cave for a long time. Perhaps this cave was a place of their prolonged stay. Perhaps one of the most mysterious inhabitants of the ancient tropics is Longus. The first time unusual reptiles were known was in the 1960s when a fossil of one of these species was found in Kyrgyzstan. Longus were ancient small lizards with a body length of no more than 10 centimeters. They lived in the Kyrgyz forests during the Triassic period. At that time, this territory was dense jungles instead of steppes. Longus looked very similar to modern lizards, but their main distinguishing feature was 7 dorsal plates shaped like a hockey stick. Their length varied from 10 to 30 centimeters. Scientists have long tried to understand the purpose of these plates, but have not been able to. To date, there are 3 hypotheses regarding this. According to the first, the plates were only found in males, which they used to attract females. According to the second, the plates helped the lizards warm up on cool mornings and shelter from the sun on hot days. The third hypothesis seems more plausible. If it is to be believed, the plates helped Longus make smooth and long jumps from branch to branch, softening the landing, similar to wings. In 1996, teenagers accidentally found human remains near the city of Kennewick, Washington. Excavations began in the area where the find was discovered, and archaeologists were able to recover almost a complete skeleton of an unknown person. Through dating, experts determined that the age of the remains was 9,900 years. Initially, it was believed that the skeleton could not belong to an ancestor of Native Americans, as it did not have features typical of this race. However, the Native Americans themselves held a different view and demanded the return of the remains for burial. Interestingly, court hearings were held over these disputes, and anthropologists ultimately won, preserving the find for further research. In 2015, through genome sequencing, it was established that the Kennewick man was related to the Colville Indian tribe. The results of this study proved that the Native Americans were right after all. One of the dinosaur species, oviraptors, translates from Latin as egg thief. This unusual name was given after the first remains of this species were found in Mongolia in 1923. The oviraptor skeleton was located in a nest next to eggs. For a long time it was believed that the oviraptor attacked a protoceratops nest, where it was killed by the mother defending her eggs. However, scientists later realized they were mistaken in this assumption. Thanks to modern technology, paleontologists were able to thoroughly examine the discovered egg. It was approximately 80 million years old, and the embryo inside belonged to the oviraptor species. This led scientists to conclude that the individual whose remains were found in Mongolia was not attacking anyone, but simply guarding its own nest. Today, scientists know that oviraptors took great care of their nests and offspring, and of course did not steal the eggs of other dinosaurs. This footprint was found on the coast of Mexico. Its study shocked scientists because the dating of the rock in which the footprint was found pushed back the date of the first human's appearance in America by more than 100,000 years. Moreover, this footprint was much larger than any others ever found by scientists. This find led anthropologists to speculate that among the first settlers of the continent was an unknown species of humans. Judging by the size of the footprint, this species was much taller and larger. These individuals could even be called giants among humans. Unfortunately, archaeologists have not been able to find any remains to whom the footprint might belong. So far, we can't learn anything about these people. In 1922, American geologist Harold Cook discovered a strange tooth near his ranch in Nebraska. He showed his find to paleontologist Henry Osborn, who speculated that it belonged to a prehistoric human he called Hesperopithecus. Hesperopithecus is now better known as Nebraska Man. Most astonishingly, following Osborn's find, an illustration of Hesperopithecus appeared in the Illustrated London News depicting what this species of prehistoric humans looked like. It turns out that from just one tooth, the artist managed to reconstruct the appearance. In fact, the illustrator based it on a sculpture of Pithecanthropus. Incidentally, Osborn did not appreciate this drawing. In 1925, a sensational event occurred that put an end to the tales of Hesperopithecus. It turned out that the tooth found by Osborn belonged not to a human, but to a peccary, a pig-like artiodactyl mammal. In northeastern Illinois, in Mason Creek, a fossil of a swordtail, more than 310 million years old, was discovered. As known, swordtails are living fossils. They first appeared on Earth in the Ordovician period of the Paleozoic era, about 485 million years ago, and continue to exist to this day. Living fossils are of special value to paleontologists, as they provide information about evolutionary changes in anatomy, behavior, and diet. The found swordtail fossil was excellently preserved. Upon detailed examination, Russell Bicknell, an invertebrate paleontologist from the University of New England in Australia, noticed a white imprint of the brain and other parts of the ancient arthropod's nervous system. After such a discovery, scientists were able to compare the brain and nervous system of this specimen with the structure of modern swordtails. It turns out that over more than 300 million years, no changes have occurred within these animals. This discovery filled gaps in knowledge about the internal structure of ancient swordtails and allowed comparison with their modern relatives. In 2003, archaeologists were conducting excavations on the Indonesian island of Flores. In the Liangbua cave, they discovered the remains of 8 ancient humans. This find greatly surprised researchers because their height did not exceed 100 centimeters. Because of this characteristic, these people were nicknamed Hobbits, after the short-statured characters from J.R.R. Tolkien's famous trilogy, The Lord of the Rings. Officially, this species was named Homo floresiensis, or Flores Man. Distinctive features of these people were their short stature, small cranial capacity, and archaic traits. This species lacked a chin, had a large flattened nose, and massive brow ridges. The skull and limb structure of the Flores Man also differed from that of Homo sapiens in the proportion of individual bones' length. These people resembled Australopithecus, more in appearance. Despite their small cranial capacity, the hobbits were capable of making fire and manufacturing primitive tools. Their short stature was due to their isolated habitat. The island of Flores is surrounded by deep sea waters, preventing the Flores people from migrating to other regions. Interestingly, small-statured elephants also once inhabited this island. After analyzing the Hobbits' remains and their tools found in the same cave, scientists determined that these findings were 60,000 to 100,000 years old. According to anthropologists, the individuals whose remains were found were the last of their kind. The extinction of the Hobbits was likely linked to a volcanic eruption. In the vicinity of the Italian city of Altamura, in October 1993, speleologists discovered a unique find: human remains completely covered with a stalagmite growth. Anthropologists immediately took an interest in this discovery, and rightfully so. Initially, the age of the stalagmites ranged widely from 100 to 400,000 years. Only in 2015 was a more precise figure finally determined. According to the results of research based on uranium-thorium dating, the stalagmites formed on these bones about 150,000 years ago. But to whom then could these remains belong? Even during the discovery of this find, anthropologists who descended into the cave suggested that this person was a Neanderthal. But this theory could not be tested, as the skeleton was trapped in a calcite formation. Fortunately, modern scientists have technologies that not only determined the age of the minerals covering the remains, but also identified the species of prehistoric humans to which they belonged. It turns out that the anthropologists were right, and it indeed was a Neanderthal. Probably this person accidentally fell into a crevice in the cave, where he died. Thanks to the stalagmite growth, this skeleton was completely preserved even after 150,000 years. It is officially believed that the first prototype of the spark plug was invented by the French engineer Etienne Lenoir in 1860. However, a chance discovery in Southern California has cast doubt on this fact. In 1961, Mike Mikesell, Wallace Lane, and Virginia Maxey went to the mountains in the Coso area to collect various interesting stones and minerals. These three individuals had a small business selling jewelry made from semi-precious stones found inside geodes, minerals with cavities. It was then that they found a strange object resembling a geode. Upon closer inspection, they realized it was some other geological formation. Back home, the young people decided to saw the unknown stone to see what was inside. Inside was a white round object made of a material resembling ceramic. In the center of it was a 2-millimeter metallic rod that reacted to a magnet. The finders also noticed several features of this object. It was covered with mother-of-pearl shells on the outside. There were 2 more objects inside resembling a nail and a washer, and the outer surface had a hexagonal shape. Virginia Maxey took the find to a familiar geologist, who stated that it would have taken at least 500,000 years to form such a thick incrustation. Later, the object came into the hands of creationist Ron Calais, who studied it using X-rays. These images interested many scientists and researchers, who began to propose their theories regarding the mechanism's purpose. The most interesting among them was the hypothesis of Info magazine editor Paul Willis. He noted that all elements of the find correspond to the design of a spark plug: the hexagonal shape of the body, a porcelain or ceramic insulator, and a thin metallic part in the middle. However, this version still requires additional evidence. The Cheddar Man is the oldest complete skeleton found in England, dating back about 10,500 years. His remains were discovered in 1903 in the Cheddar Cave in Somerset County. More than a century after this valuable archaeological find was discovered, scientists announced to the world that they had found a direct maternal relative of the Cheddar Man. He was a history teacher named Adrian Targett. This research was conducted by Professor of Genetics at Oxford University, Brian Sykes. He believed that the Cheddar Man was an ancestor of all current Britons. Surprisingly, this species was not at all similar to Europeans. He had dark skin and a wide nose but blue eyes. This species of humans interbred with other species throughout evolution, so their genes are present in some Britons in minimal amounts. Adrian Targett had a higher than average indicator of this, indicating his direct lineage from this primitive human. Agree, even physically, these two individuals look somewhat similar to each other. Dr. Johann Adam Beringer was a professor at the medical faculty of the University of Würzburg in Germany. In the early 18th century, he became interested in paleontology and began collecting various fossils. Unusual finds were brought to him by local boys, to whom the doctor paid money for this activity. One day, the boys brought him 3 stones with images of the sun and worms. Beringer valued this find, and the boys began to deliver dozens of such stones to him every day. Eventually, in 6 months, Beringer's collection accumulated about 2,000 such artifacts with various images. The professor believed the stones were evidence of God's power. He even wrote a book with theories about the origin of these artifacts. In it, he also refuted the idea of mystification, questioning who would want to spend so much effort on their creation, and, most importantly, why. Unfortunately, one day the professor noticed tool marks on one of the stones. He had to admit that he had been the victim of a hoax. Humiliated, Beringer decided to sue those he believed were his offenders. These were the algebra and geography professor J. Roderick and librarian Georg von Eckhart, both of whom also worked at the University of Würzburg. Surprisingly, Beringer managed to prove their guilt and win the lawsuit. The Story of Piltown Man began in 1912. That year, British amateur archaeologist Charles Dawson discovered fragments of a human skull in the Piltdown cave. After studying and reconstructing it, the Briton concluded that he was dealing with an unknown species of humans and named it Dawson's Man. According to the archaeologist, primitive tools and animal fossils were also found near the remains in the cave. This led him to suppose that Piltdown Man lived there about 1 million years ago. Now it sounds ludicrous, but at the time, this news was a sensation and quickly spread through the press. The find was presented to the public as the missing link in evolution between apes and modern humans. Scientists began to suspect something was wrong with the found skull as early as 1912. For example, British anthropologist Arthur Keith noted a discrepancy in the proportions of the teeth and jaw, but no one listened to him then. Finally, in 1953, it turned out that the main part of the skull belonged to a modern human, while the lower sawed-off part was from an orangutan. This story raises the question, what if Piltdown Man was not the only fabrication among archaeological finds? During excavations on the island of Spitsbergen, Norwegian and Swedish scientists made a sensational discovery: the oldest Ethiosaur fossils ever found. It was previously believed that these lizards first entered the sea 252 million years ago, after the Great Permian extinction, but the latest find has refuted this fact. Ichthyosaur vertebrae were found in rock formations. Their dating showed that these geological formations were underwater 2 million years before the extinction. This means that ichthyosaurs were already aquatic at that time. Additionally, using computer modeling, scientists were able to establish that the individual to which the remains belonged had anatomy corresponding to its later sea-dwelling relatives. As a result of the research, paleontologists concluded that ichthyosaurs swam in the water 2 million years before the Great Extinction and may never have had terrestrial ancestors. Since 1991, archaeologists have discovered 5 skulls belonging to prehistoric humans in the vicinity of Dmanisi in Georgia. The last skull was found in 2015 and was described quite recently. Before this discovery, it was believed that the first representative of Homo was Homo habilis, who then evolved into Homo erectus. However, during many excavations, scientists concluded that other species of primitive humans existed between these evolutionary stages. For example, the last skull found in Dmanisi was unique. Its brain volume was significantly smaller than that of the other 4 hominids whose skulls were found in the same area. Yet its height and weight were close to that of modern humans. The age of these remains was 1.8 million years. This discovery changed anthropologists' views on human evolution. Firstly, it pushed back the known dates of the appearance of our first ancestors by 800,000 years. Secondly, it provided further evidence that the accepted scheme of evolution was incorrect, and the species of primitive humans were much more diverse. On Seymour Island in Antarctica, Chilean scientists discovered a gigantic egg from the dinosaur era. The egg was quite soft and resembled a deflated soccer ball. Its dimensions were 29 by 20 centimeters, making it second only to the egg of the extinct Madagascar bird Epiornis in size. Scientists determined that the find was 68 million years old. Whom it belonged to remains unknown, but paleontologists are inclined to believe it was an egg of a mosasaur, an extinct marine reptile. Several factors pointed to this. There were never any animals large enough to lay such a gigantic egg in Antarctica, except for mosasaurs. A few dozen meters from the find, archaeologists discovered fragments of a mosasaur skeleton, but there was no evidence that the individual was associated with the egg. Moreover, experts concluded that the egg was laid by an animal at least 7 meters long. Mosasaurs indeed had such dimensions. Paleontologists studying the find believe that the offspring hatched from the egg as soon as it was laid by the mother, meaning it was fully developed and ready for independent life. If the egg indeed belonged to a mosasaur, this discovery helped scientists learn more about the life of these marine reptiles. Helicoprions lived on our planet during the Permian period, about 252 million years ago. This creature belonged to the class of cartilaginous fish, like modern sharks. Unfortunately, scientists still do not have a clear idea of what these fish looked like. The first Helicoprion fossil, or rather the fossil of its tooth spiral, was found in Russia, in the Perm region in 1897. Since no other fragments of the skeleton were found by archaeologists, there was debate about where this strange spiral was located. Initially, it was believed that it was located on the fish's nose. In the 1930s, fragments of the jaw of a closely related fish, Edestus, were found and described, leading to the hypothesis that the spiral was the lower jaw. It was thought that the jaw acquired such an unusual shape due to the continuous growth of teeth. As they grew, larger old teeth were pushed forward and shed. The spiral was located in the symphyseal cavity, and only the large, old teeth were visible from the outside. In 2008, American paleontologist Roger Prudy hypothesized that the spiral was actually in the throat of Helicoprion. He argued that the lack of wear on the teeth supported this. Unfortunately, solving the mystery of the Helicoprion spiral will only be possible after a fossil with fragments of this fish's skull is discovered. In 1868, German biologist Ernst Haeckel proposed to name the intermediate link between apes and humans Pithecanthropus. He believed that hominids of this species were already bipedal and had a more developed brain, but they still couldn't speak. Dutch anatomist Eugene Dubois became interested in Haeckel's hypothesis and decided to find remains of this prehistoric species. For 3 years, he tried to conduct excavations in the Dutch East Indies and on the island of Sumatra, but they were unsuccessful. Then, in 1890, Dubois went to the island of Java. That same year, near the village of Kedung Brubus, he was able to discover a fragment of a human jaw, so he decided to continue his search for Pithecanthropus remains. Over the next 2 years, near the village of Trinil, he managed to find a primitive skull cap, a femur of a bipedal human, and several large teeth. Since all these finds were in the same layer and had the same preservation, Dubois concluded that the remains belonged to the same person. Originally, Dubois' discovery was subjected to severe criticism, as the skull cap indeed resembled the anatomy of an ape, and the femur clearly belonged to a human. However, subsequent excavations on the island of Java confirmed that a prehistoric species of humans did indeed exist there about 10,000 years ago. Since 1950, Pithecanthropus, Sinanthropus, and other closely related humans in anatomy and chronology have been classified as Homo erectus, or upright man. In November 1998, Portuguese archaeologists João Mauricio and Pedro Souto were investigating the Lagar Velho cave in the Lepedo Valley. Deep in the cave, they discovered fragments of human bones protruding from under the stones. During the excavations, it turned out that a child was buried at this site. The skeleton lay in a shallow pit. Underneath it were fragments of charred branches and animal skin dyed with ochre. Next to the child's feet, archaeologists found a rabbit skull and deer pelvic bones. After radiocarbon analysis of the find, experts determined that the child was a boy. He died about 24,500 years ago at the age of 4.5 years. But the most interesting thing learned about the child was that he was a hybrid of a Neanderthal and Homo sapiens. Overall, he had anatomy typical of modern humans, but the proportions of the boy's lower limbs were characteristic of Neanderthals. This discovery sparked a lot of debate. Critics argued that the mixing of the two species could not have occurred, as Neanderthals had long been extinct by the time the child was buried. At the end of the 20th century, there was no direct evidence that Neanderthals and sapiens actively interacted with each other. But today, thanks to many new findings, scientists are no longer surprised by the mixing of the blood of these two human species. The Ethiopian Paranthropus is one of the oldest paranthropuses known to science. The first relatively complete skull of the Ethiopian Paranthropus was found in 1985 near Lake Turkana in Kenya. The remains were located under a layer of volcanic rock, which was at least 2.5 million years old. Later, the lower jaw of another Ethiopian Paranthropus was found in the same place. The skull discovered in 1985 was named the Black Skull because mineralization had turned it blue-black. This find, in its general shape, resembled the skull of the Afar Australopithecus. The differences were that the Ethiopian hominid had a smaller cranial box with a larger sagittal crest and very large jaws. The teeth of this species did not survive, but from the size of the oral cavity, it was concluded that they were large. Likely, the Ethiopian Paranthropus preferred a diet of tough, fibrous food. This species combined primitive and individual characteristics. Scientists placed it on the evolutionary tree of humans between the Afar Australopithecus and the later Paranthropus boisei. The only thing still unknown to science is which hominid species the Ethiopian Paranthropus was an ancestor of. Some anthropologists believe that it was the ancestor of the East and South African robust Australopithecines, while others suggest that the Ethiopian species is the ancestor of Paranthropus boisei only. And that's all from me. If you liked this video, don't forget to rate it, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell. Your activity is the best reward for me. Thank you for your attention. See you soon. Goodbye.